And share the screen. There. I did it all in order. It's always a good thing when you do it that way. But welcome for our part 2 of the facilitator training. And today we're going to look at retreat 3 and the report on here. And these are all one PowerPoint that I can send you when we're done, kind of thing. So retreat 3. Now, the purpose of retreat 3 is spending time reflecting. This is writing the story. So it's spending time reflecting and dreaming and visioning, developing a vocation statement, visioning and planning for the future, and planning the next steps to complete the discernment process and the report. So that's what happens in retreat 3. This retreat is the discernment team, the session, deacons, and other church leaders as they wish to identify. It really shouldn't be the whole church kind of thing, unless your church is only 20 people or something like that. But it's the leadership of the church. But definitely, I always say, plan that retreat around when the majority of the session can be there. They really need to be the ones who are here for this one. So this is the purpose of it. This is what they'll be doing. So, and this retreat will take 4 to 5 hours. This is going to be a real retreat, where the other ones are kind of like extended gatherings. This is a retreat and should be planned. It can be done at the church if they want to, but it could go to, you can go to Johnsonburg, you can go to, another location, that kind of thing. You need to plan for a meal, snacks, that kind of thing. It can be done online if necessary, but you lose something there, but should another pandemic come along, you can do it online, but I would recommend this be done in person. The agenda for the retreat is you do dwelling in the word. What did we learn, between retreat 2 and 3? There's a time for reflection, individual reflection and group reflection. Then they will work on the vocation statement. And they'll work on the visioning, and they'll work on action plans, and then they will plan for their report, kind of thing. So you can see it will take longer, and depending what time you start, you put breaks and meals in there as needed. What you will need for this is notes and reports from previous retreats and events. So they should be keeping all those large sheets of paper that you use, or handouts or pictures, or however they want to do it, but everybody should have access to those at this time. And so during this preparation, they should also have reports from the storytelling season and the report of the discernment team. And as you remember, every time I was, one of the things they have to do is write up what happened. Well, all that stuff has to be written up for this retreat. So it's like, kind of remind them all along the way, keep ahead of the writing, because you need this for this retreat at this point. Oh, I did say discernment team, session members. Also, church staff should come to this. Maybe not like the church secretary, but if you have a Christian ed person, even a musician, the pastor, if there is one, if this is a, church where the pastor's there, the associate pastor, that kind of staff should be there. Even if it's volunteer or paid, they can identify who needs to be there, but those should be there. So we start with dwelling in the word as they have been doing, and we're back to Luke 10, 1 through 12. So they would do that again, introduce each other, do the listening piece as they've been doing all along. Then you do a section of what did we learn? We've done that, each time. And so you do the big paper, the whiteboard, or however you do it, the storytelling season. What did we learn from the storytelling season? What did we learn from the discernment event? And then also review retreats 1 and 2, where they did the what did we learn. So it's kind of helpful to bring all those pieces back in, kind of thing. Everybody got that? So kind of bring all the what did we learn together and spend some time on that. Then after you've done that, your job would be to kind of like so after we've done what did we learn, so let's just kind of review it, because this leads into the next section. Your job would be, what have we learned so far? We've learned about our church's history and demographics. We've listened to congregational stories. We began discerning where God is in mission and ministry, and you can highlight pieces that they have already mentioned. And we began to process the process of writing our story. So this is where we are, is we're now pulling all these pieces and we're writing the story. And this kind of is the intro to the next section. You can use, if you want to have them add to it, what have we learned about church's history, and do mutual invitation and have them help you, identify things. It all depends on how the group does. I've used that before. It's just like, okay, what have we learned about the church's histories and demographics? Everybody go around the room. It all depends how many people you have, or you can just have them popcorn ideas up there, or you can just identify what you've just heard. But it leads into this time. So we have heard all these things. We have talked about all these things. Now we're going to take time to reflect on it. What I'm going to tell you now is not in the handbook at this moment, but will be within a week, because I like this new idea I came up with. So this is a time they will have individual reflection. And at the time of the individual reflection, you hand out those sticky notes again. And have as many, you might as well just buy stock in 3M, because you're going to use more. So they get sticky notes, as many as they want. And one color is going to be, as they do this time of reflection, one color is things that we should keep. That could be the red or the yellow. It depends but make it a consistent color. So one color is things we should keep that, we've heard, we want to keep that, we got to move that forward. Another color is, maybe this is the blue, things we let go of. Things what we've been doing, we're going to let go of. The ideas, we're going to let go of. Things that maybe along that lines that we're going to give a sabbatical to. That we don't need to do Vacation Bible School anymore. We're going to give Vacation Bible School a sabbatical. We're going to give things that are just, just don't have energy. We're going to write those things down. So they get to write these down. This is the individual reflection. And then one color is, what is God's new idea that is emerging? So what is God's new idea? It can be more than one, definitely can be. And they can, maybe use the yellow for that, and they write down what is God's new idea. And they just go off into their own space. They can, sit around a table, they can, go wherever, and everybody just takes 15, 20 minutes to do individual reflection. And then they come back together and they do their group reflection. So that's when you start, you can post it, use a whiteboard, use a wall, use a table where they can put their ideas. And if someone had the same idea, you put them together. So you start stacking them. If everybody had the same idea that we need to give Vacation Bible School a sabbatical, where you start stacking those on top of each other and start putting those sticky notes together. We're not necessarily looking for a color like we did with the timeline, but more of just putting those ideas together. And then they start putting them all together under that group reflection. And then you have a conversation. What did we learn from this? What are the things that we are learning? None of it, they don't make the decision that we are going to make, put Vacation Bible School on sabbatical. We're just putting it out there that could be an option. So that's what they do. Okay. One of the other things, that God's new idea, have you ever heard of a BHAG? Has anyone ever used that? It's the big, hairy, audacious goal.
Yep.
Have you heard of that? So some people, some people have. Good, because I was hoping I wasn't the only one who ever used that. But BHAG, you could use BHAG for that one color. But I like God's new idea. What's emerging as God's idea. So that's the time, and you need to give some good time to that. So I'd say 45 minutes or more, depending on the size of the group, to that. So that's the reflection, and then you have a lot of conversations around it, and just allow for that space for them to have the conversations, whether they're just standing around looking at the notes or whatever, but they need to have that space. Don't rush this time. And probably usually after that, that's a good time to take a break, kind of thing. Because the next section is the vocation statement. In so many mission studies and things like that, we write a mission statement. And we don't write a mission statement, because this has all been about not what is our mission, but what is God's call. So you're now going to write a vocation statement. This is about where God is calling us. So the purpose of the vocation statement is to describe the purpose, the mission, and the call of the congregation's ministry in this time and place. And that's the important part. It is in this time and place, not what we did 80 years ago. In the 80s, when we had, this great youth program, or the 70s. I think we're getting to the point where a lot of people don't remember the 50s anymore, but it's not about what used to be. It's about what is our mission and ministry in this time and place now. And the vocation statement should reflect the stories that have been gathered from the previous work. The vocation statement normally should be one sentence or shorter, or short, like a tweet. Tweets are now longer, but so many characters kind of thing, and easy to memorize, or at least to restate to someone. The statement will have a forward movement, and it's not about the past history or the identity, or the past identity of the congregation. The visioning and planning and direction of the congregation should be reflected in the vocation statement. So what you do at this point is you review this purpose with them, and then you brainstorm ideas with single words, short phrases. What is the call? And if they're looking at the time of reflection, it's going to start emerging.
Jane, can I make a comment here?
Yeah.
I think one of the things, it should be intuitive, right? And I don't know that it needs definitively to be said, but I think this is where the demographic study and the psychosocial study is so important. Because the comment you made, a lot of churches, well, this is what we did in the 80s, this is what we did in the 90s. the community around the church has distinctly, so many churches has distinctly changed, and the local church is no longer reflective, right?
Right. But hang on to that, hang on to that, Ian, because that's going to come up next.
Okay, so
Okay.
sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
No problem. So it should be about forward movement, and the visioning and planning should be in this vocation statement. So keep working with the words. I guess that's where I was, is brainstorm ideas with single words, short phrases that have emerged from all those conversations that you've had all the whole part, the whole time, but especially during this part of the retreat, and keep working the words and thoughts until something starts to emerge. So you're going to use a lot of paper, a lot of whiteboard, a lot of writing ideas. I love whiteboards. That's my jam. And use all the colors and circles and say, and your job is to help facilitate them, kind of focusing down on what they're all really thinking. So this is a really important part of the facilitating. This is truly facilitating what they're saying. So you get down to some ideas and some things like that. At this point, they're going to, even before they do that, they're going to say, can we have some examples of vocation statements? I usually say, get through the words and get down to something, then hand them. There is something in the handbook about samples. Then give them the samples so they can sort of refine. You just don't want them to use someone else's vocation statement, kind of thing. So get them to where they get down to some really good words or phrases, and then say, okay, here's some examples. And there's like about 4 or 5 in the handbook, and maybe more. I don't know if I've counted lately. So the next thing is, here are examples of vocation statements. And this is where it comes back to, Ian, the discussion of the demographics and what did we learn about this? Our examples of the vocation is, our vocation is to feed the hungry of our county. And after discovering that 70% of the children live in food insecurity, that was like, oh, okay, we've learned that. And this is where we are in this time of place, using our demographics and our learnings. God calls us to be a place of rest and relaxation for those who are weary. And this was a church that just had a lot of really comfortable space, to gather and stuff. And they learned that young families were stressed and overwhelmed. That was something learned from their demographics, but also from the conversations with the young families in their neighborhoods and in their church. God calls us to be disciples. This particular one came right out of the dwelling in the Word. And we are to keep learning and living what we have learned, to teach others to serve God. That's an actual vocation statement. It's a little awkward from the language, but that's what it is. We are to keep learning and living what we have learned and to teach others to serve God. Some of what they learned was there was not enough volunteers, and the congregation believed that they could be a facility. They could believe their facility could be a training center for volunteers and for developing disciples, because they had a lot of empty classroom space that could do some training. And I think they went on to invite, I think it's the Red Cross. It could have been Salvation Army. It was someone who needs space to train people, for different things. And they became a training center because they were the only ones that had that kind of space in the community. And they did a lot of, Bible studies and stuff like that. And then the other one is, God calls us to be a neighborhood church. What they learned was the composition of their neighborhood did not match the congregation. The congregation was older white people who were blue collar workers. And that was what the neighborhood was when they all moved there, 30, 40, 50 years prior, and where their kids grew up, and they many of them didn't even live in the neighborhood. They still drove in because that was their church. But the neighborhood was very, very young, lots and lots of kids, and it was low income, white and African American and Hispanic living in the community. So their goal was to become a church that reflected the neighborhood. And which was interesting because it meant a lot of those older white people had to give up positions of power. And which did cause some stress. So these are examples of vocation statements. And I just added the stuff, that's how they came up with the vocation statement, is that. So I think that kind of answers, Ian, what you're talking about is it's about the demographics. So, don't, shortchange the demographic time. All right, so after they've done the vocation statement, it's going to be a mess, at this point. It's still going to be all over the place. And there may be competing statements, and that's okay to let them have it, because some size churches may want 2 different statements, which is fine. If they're bigger, they can do that. So it depends on the size of the church, but there may be several competing. So you just let them kind of sit with that.
Jean, how would you navigate that if there are two vocation statements? How would you navigate that?
I would let them sit with it for a while and then go on to the visioning part and then see what emerges from that. So the visioning part is about what's God's vision for us. So I usually do a where there is no vision, the people perish, the kind of thing. And if people can't see what God is doing, they stumble all over themselves. But when they attend to what he reveals, what God reveals, they are most blessed. So we kind of talk about that, do a little dwelling on that. The vision is not the vision of one person, but the vision of the whole community. And vision, what we're going to, the next part is, we're going to look forward to what can be done in the context of the present. And there's some other things in the handbook about what is vision, that kind of thing. And you can just share that, here's what vision means. And we're not looking for a vision statement, but for visioning. So you get together with them as a group, because the vision is about the community, not about individuals. So there's no individual work here. It's all about the community. What's God's vision for us? So we do this question. God has a future for this congregation. And some congregations don't believe that. So I like to always emphasize God has a future for this congregation. Using the information that has been gathered so far, where do you see, dream, or believe is the future God is leading, calling, or pointing you towards? So you can still have those couple competing vocation statements up there, put in front of them, put them on big paper, that kind of thing. And where do you see, dream, or believe God's is the future God is leading, calling, or pointing you to? So using mutual invitation, you have each person answer that question, and you start capturing it on whiteboard. So with mutual invitation, there is no comments from others. So one person, if you haven't done mutual invitation, you start with the person whose birthday is closest to that date. And that person starts, and then they invite the next person to answer the question after they've done. But there is no comments or poo-pooing or, applauding or whatever. It is all done. You listen and you let the next person do. So you start putting it out there. And again, you're going to facilitate the conversation. And kind of as they've done their thing, you start pointing out to them, where did you see the patterns? Where do you see commonalities, differences? Where do you resonate with some of these things? And some of that resonating probably comes in the mutual invitation. As people hear others, they'll say, I totally agree with what David said. All right, that's my answer. I want to put that up there. Is there, you can also point out, is there one thing or more that keeps emerging in your conversations, and you start narrowing it down to, 2 or 4 ideas of what is emerging. And it's going to be around those vocation statements, and it'll become clear that there's more energy around one statement than over the other. So you need to kind of point that out. There seems to be a lot of energy. So I'll show you what examples of the visioning, so that might help you understand. All right, the visioning. So if our vocation is to feed the hungry of our county, the visioning for the future is, our vision is that 6 months from now, we will have established an ongoing food drive for the local pantry. So after you've done the mutual invitation, then you start doing this part of what is some visioning, what are some things that we've talked about that would do this. So our vision is that 6 months from now, we will have established an ongoing food drive for the local food pantry. And if there's no local food pantry, maybe we start one, but just to say there is one. 1 year from now, we will have started a satellite food pantry at our location and started plans for a community garden on our property. And then 3 years from now, we will be working with our community government on ways we can stop hunger in our community. This is their vision on this one. God calls us to be a place of rest and relaxation for others. Visioning for their future is, our vision is in the first 6 months, we'll have started a Saturday morning kids craft program where parents can drop off their elementary age children to learn a new skill such as cooking, building a birdhouse, or gardening. Actually, one of our churches do that. In a year, we would like to have a place where young women can come for a spiritual retreat. So you kind of start putting those ideas out there and just kind of keep them talking about what works, and then they'll start narrowing it down, kind of thing. And this is one where people are often standing, they're walking up to the board. You need to give them a space to kind of work together on this kind of thing. So you spend a good chunk of time talking about the visioning. You tell them you don't have to do everything. What's realistic? Now, this is a place where some of those, poo-pooers come in and, say, well, we don't have enough volunteers for that, kind of thing. And you just like, okay, let's just try to keep moving forward, and think about maybe, 2 months from now, we will have invited people to volunteer, kind of thing. So you try to not let the poo-poos, poo-poo on the conversation. But that's the real challenge of facilitating it, is just keeping it forward, making it move forward. On occasion, people don't want to, they can't do it, but most of the time they get into it. Because you try to keep it in their context. If they say, well, we can't afford that, well, then let's talk about what can we afford in the next 2 to 3 months. We don't have the money, but what do we have? We do have assets, that kind of thing. I'm thinking of adding an additional thing that people could do if they want to. I'm not going to put it in the whole process, but asset mapping is a really kind of good thing, especially if a church does clearly have a lot of assets and are underusing it, like property, finances, people, space, that kind of thing. So that's going to be added to the webpage, but it doesn't necessarily have to happen. So this is examples of visioning. And then after they've kind of got some things, you take a break and kind of try to, on a whiteboard or on the paper or however, kind of group the stuff, in a place that they can see this is what they've discussed. And then you work on the actual action steps. And this is what the action steps look like. With the vision, where do you believe God is going to be 6 months, 3 months, 3 years? In our first 6 months, the youth group will volunteer to volunteered, the youth group leader who was there volunteered the middle school group to do a Super Bowl Sunday. So this is, you start putting in some actual things with people there. That's why it's important to have the session, church leaders, staff. They're the ones who are going to actually, kind of lead this stuff. Christian Ed Committee leader agreed to add a unit about feeding the hungry, and the adult seminar will do a whole month about using Matthew 25 material about feeding the hungry. It could be even in the first 3 months, we will find the resources to do education on, that kind of thing. The session will plan a food drive 6 months after the middle school Super Bowl. So now you're starting to get a little more specific about what you actually can do. This usually when they start talking here, they're like, well, yeah, we could plan a food drive. That doesn't cost us any money. And, some people will say, I can do it, that kind of thing. And within the first year session, it'll invite a representative from the county food pantry to speak to the session or congregation about being a satellite distribution center. And if this is a church looking for a pastor, we'll work with the new pastorate ways to use the green space that they have to become a community garden. So these are things, this is what the action steps look like. And they can be, we say 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, or it can be 3 months, 6 months, whatever is working for them. They can say, well, in 3 months, we can have this organized, fine, put down 3 months, that sort of thing. It's more to just say, here are some things we actually can do to do that, some sort of thing. So are there any questions? Just speak up.
No, Jean, I just wanted to say that in this, I love the focus on vocation. So often I have found that I've worked with very small churches.
Yeah.
Many of them, I've pastored 11 different churches through transitions, and they want to save their church is
Yep.
what they think this is about, rather and getting them to think about what it is that God is calling them to do or be, not to save their church, but to be faithful.
Yeah.
Is I think really important. And even when they go back in a few years and look at where they are, the success is not about saving the church. It's what were they able to do for the community at that time.
Church
Right.
serving.
Well, one of the stories I like to tell is about Rockport Church, which is a little church,
Yeah.
just a few miles from my house. And this was even, and my husband is their pastor there right now, but this is even before he got there. They were like, the only way to save our church is to get young people, young people have to come in. I mean, these were all people in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And we're like, well, the only way they can come is you have to invite them in, and so they did have they still do have several teachers and former teachers in the congregation. So they decided that once a month, that's all they could really manage. Once a month, they have what they call the Rockport Kids. And I think it's the first Saturday.
Oh, wow,
And on the first Saturday of the month, they do some sort of activity for the local kids.
Oh.
And they're the ones that did they learned how to build birdhouses. And they'll, in May for Mother's Day, they do planters, they just did just this month they did making chocolates, dipping chocolate, making candy, I guess is what. So that's what they do. They, and they don't necessarily have any Bible stories or anything like that. They just invite them into the church. And they do this, and they're teachers, so they have these, kind of lesson plans around it. And they've been doing this for 5 years now. It was before the pandemic when they started, and even tried to do some things during the pandemic outside. And just not this Sunday, the Sunday before, they just took in 7 new members.
Oh, no kidding.
And it was related to inviting people into the church. Oh, one of their favorites was someone has a pond on, these are the farmers of Warren County. They have a pond that's stocked, and they show kids how to fish. That's a big one. They get a lot of kids coming up and fishing because there's this pond on their farm. So it's stuff like that. So I think, it's like, well, we need to save our church. Well, how are we going to save our church? Well, we need young people. How are we going to get young people in? So you just keep working that to say, here's some things we can do. And that comes out of that visioning.
So how, so in terms of the visioning, in terms of, next steps in this process, how is this helping, some of these folks, they desperately, they have this idea that they want the church to continue, they want to save the church. But one of the challenges is that in saving the church, they're bringing new people in, the church is growing, the leadership is changing, and then they don't like the way that the church is going, right? How is Turn the Page framed in such a way that for those folks, and there's usually a core group of them who they want to see the church grow, but they want to see it grow in their terms, not based on how things need to be for the genuine next steps that the church needs to take?
Well, we can't really address that in this. It's more like, where can we build the energy around something? And the people who really want to move things forward will gravitate to that energy. And will this cause conflict? Yes, it probably will at some point. But we can't at this point address, if you do this, it's going to cause change. That's something, especially the new pastor needs to be aware of, that they need to be looking for someone who, that could be a conversation, is your next pastor needs to be someone who can help you navigate the change that this report is asking you to do. But it can't, to try to address it in here, that would just take you to a place that they'll just stop it, because it'll scare them.
Dean,
Yeah.
part of what I heard in your presentation about the visioning, you seem to be using some of the strategies of appreciative inquiry
Oh, yeah.
in countering the negativity that's there. And I was wondering, or potential negativity, and I was wondering whether, as a sidelight, whether just a refresher on some of the strategies or the things to do in countering those kinds of, immediate knee-jerk, oh, we can't possibly do that for this reason or that reason, built into this training later on, perhaps as a corollary to it, might not be a helpful tool to have in our kit.
That would be a helpful tool. Yes, I will take that, into consideration. Steve, some of you know Steve Houston,
Yeah.
who used to be on staff here, and is now in. He's putting together a whole bunch of appreciative inquiry trainings and stuff. So he might be a helpful person to call on to do that. But yes, that is a good idea. I actually talked to him because he and I were the ones who got this Turn the Page going because of the pandemic, so that kind of thing. Other questions about this section? So the next section you will review with the team, with the group that's there, but they won't do it there. They'll just plan on how and that's the report kind of thing. They may need another meeting to finalize the report, but I don't know if they need a facilitator for that. They might, it depends on the group. All right, so the next section is the report. Oh, I forgot to put in a little title page on the report. Okay, there should have been a title page. but here it is. The report. What needs to be included? Now, there should be, even if for churches that are going to be searching for a pastor, there has to be a report. There, there's no if and or buts about that. They have to have the report. But those who are not, we recommend doing a report anyway. Write it down, put it someplace, because people are going to want to see what was the outcome of all their work, over the last 4 to 6 months. And so it's really, I think, just to be respectful of all those people who put in a whole lot of time, is to be able to hand them something and say, here's what we did. So it's about communication, but also putting this together. This does not have to be 70 pages long, which I have seen some mission reports come back, and I'm just like, I don't need that much. Don't send me all that. But so this is what's in the report. This is what the church development team needs and COM needs. All right, chapter 1 is the process. This is what we did. You don't write chapter 1 until the very end. And this is what we did. We went through this, and it should be like 1 page. With pictures, if you want to put pictures in, some people are pretty creative that way. Chapter 2 is our timeline report, our timeline event. What did we learn from that? Maybe a picture of it, that kind of thing. There's some instructions within that particular event of what goes in the report. Chapter 3, who are the people in our neighborhood? Because there's specifically, you have to answer questions. And it says, do not delay doing this. It'll take you forever. So you write a paragraph about each thing, and that should be here. And then do not let them put in the whole mission insight demographic report. Don't do that. You can stick it at the end if you want, but just a summary of what they learned. And that shouldn't be very long either. But don't stick in the whole thing. Chapter 4 is the storytelling season, and you write a 1 or 2 page summary of that. Chapter 5 is where is God calling us, kind of thing, and there's some instructions on, 1 page summary of the learnings from the discernment process, the discernment event, I should say spiritual discernment event, right after the storytelling season, and a summary of the conversation that was emerging, from that goes into, that's chapter 5. I should have put that, the discernment event, where it goes with that. Chapter 6 is what is our vocation, our vision, and our future stories, and how are we going to get there? And that was what we just reviewed in the handbook. In the handbook, there is some, examples of, I broke them up for this, but there are examples of how those all 3 go together: the vocation statement, then the visioning, and then the action steps. So those all go together right there. You capture in there any of the conversations that they had, and that kind of thing. Now, chapter 7 is the other stuff. And these are things that should be in there, definitely have to be in there for churches searching for a pastor, but those that aren't really should have those too. And one is the financial health conversation, which we'll look at next. That needs to be in there. That is a must. COM will be looking for it. And the PCUSA statistical report, which includes their most recent congregational statistical report, which they can find at their church trends, or their stated clerk has a copy of it. It's the annual report, the annual statistical report. That's what needs to be in there. And that's about it. Yeah. That's what goes in there. And anything else they may, if they want to put some pictures in there, that's fine, that kind of thing. That's what chapter 7 is. For other stuff, maybe they did the asset mapping, kind of thing, they can put that in there. Or if they, if they come up with some other things, that's what goes in chapter 7. The financial health assessment report This can be done before the last retreat, before retreat 3, or just after. They could do it, but it needs to be done in that time frame, kind of thing. And it also can be handed off to the financial people of the church. It doesn't have to be the discernment team. So the discernment team needs to, at some point, and you as facilitators point that out, that the financial health report needs to be done. Someone needs to do it, and it can be done, I would say, towards the end of, just before retreat 3 or just after that, around that time, before the report is done. There are 2 options for the financial health assessment. First one is the one I think they should do. And this is the Presbyterian Foundation Health Assessment. It is not available right now. It will be, I am told, but it is an online assessment that provides 9 areas of financial health. And you go online to the Presbyterian Foundation. You have to have your financial information in front of you, and you fill out questions. And you just click, we do this well. It's about stewardship. It's about your budgeting. It's about your balance sheet, that kind of stuff. And then once you put all this in, it takes about 20 minutes maybe to get all the information in, maybe less. You hit submit and you get a report just like that, boom. And they are using, because you have to put in your church identification number. They're using your statistical information from your previous years. So the reason it's not available is 2018 or 2019, the General Assembly, in their not so great wisdom, decided not to ask for financial information, a breakdown of your financial information. Well, what that did is then it started to skew the results of the foundation's assessment, because they use your statistical reports, your statistical information, do that. So they had to pull it about 2021 is when they had to pull it. Well, in 2022, they started asking again. A lot of us complained, including the foundation complained, is we need that information. So they started asking it again. So there's 2022 and 2023, we will now have the statistical information, which the foundation says is enough to get this started again. So the 2023 statistical information will be published hopefully late April, early May, and this should be back up online by the end of the summer, is what I'm told. So to me, this is the best thing, because it comes up with this report, and it's and it'll say, stewardship campaign, I think specifically, and it'll have red, yellow, or green. And if you get green, you're good to go. You're doing well. Yellow, here's some areas you need to be concerned about. Red is, you need to be working on this, and here's some resources. And it connects you with links and stuff to videos and stuff to help you do it. That is not available right yet. So in the packet right now is the financial health assessment. These are forms that are on our web page under the turn the page, and maybe even in the packet right now. And it's just, they fill in the financial reports, kind of gives us some information, but it doesn't give that good analysis and evaluation of how you're doing. But it does help church development and COM get a picture of how the church is doing on their financial stuff. So it does have to be in there for churches searching for a pastor, and those who are not, it should be done, but it's not required. But this one, the Presbyterian one, is really good. All right, what to do with the report and you will review this with them. I'm sure the church development liaison person will review this with them. The COM will review this with them. If the church is in transition or in a pastor search, in that search, the draft report should be shared with the church development team liaison first for input and review. And church development assigns someone to every church that is in the search or has asked to do this. So they review that, they kind of go back and forth, say, and the church development team is going to say, yeah, you're missing this, or here's some, helpful ideas, more editing and just making sure everything is there. The report then is shared after they've done that, and that's the discernment team. The report is shared and approved by session. Then the session figures out ways to share that information with the congregation. So they publish it, they do, TikTok on it, they do Facebook, whatever. They start sharing this information with the congregation. Nothing in that thing should be secret. It should be totally open for everybody to see. The report then is, after it's approved by session, the report is shared and approved by the church development team. They do have to approve it, and they review it very thoroughly, make suggestions. Hopefully there's no suggestions to make because they've already been worked out on those other 2 times, but maybe there needs to be something. And then church development forwards it to committee on ministry, where the committee on ministry approves, maybe is not the right word, but receives the report and then gives the church permission to form a PNC or to proceed with their search. So this is, you might want to do this with them and remind them that is the process in that order. Are there questions?
So on the first time that you meet with your discernment team, is it advisable or inadvisable to sort of give everyone a snapshot of what all the work involved? So like from very beginning to the very end. So I mean, I'm just thinking like the 2 retreat stuff and where you wind up, or do you just sort of do the retreat, tell this is what happens, first retreat, second retreat, third retreat? Because I'm looking at the very end of this, and it seemed like sometimes if people know where they're working, what they're working toward, it may make the rest of the process a little easier.
Yep. And again, nothing is secret. So I would give them the whole handbook.
Okay.
And maybe not in that first retreat, maybe just kind of say, this is the things we're going to be doing.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was asking.
But I would, but focus on retreat 1, retreat 2. But
Right.
they can read it, they can see it. It's on the webpage. They can go and get it themselves,
Okay.
kind of thing. I even had one church, because on the webpage, just to make it easier, it's in 3 separate sections. You go and you'll see retreat 1, retreat 2, retreat 3. But I had one church that absolutely insisted it had to be one big handbook. And I was like, well, just print it out and put 3 holes in it and, put it in no, they wanted it all one big PDF. I was like, oh my goodness, but it's there in 3 sections, but they can have, you can tell them to go look or hand it to them the whole, right off, print it out and hand it to them, or do a Dropbox, and it's all there. They should be able to see it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Other questions? The best way to learn this is just to do it, as if in anything. And it's pretty forgiving if you kind of stumble around in it, just like, oh, I forgot to do that. Well, just go back and do it. It's more meant to be conversations and, kind of community kind of dialogue. It's not very super strict on, the order kind of thing.
I had a question about the neighborhood, the chapter 3, who are the people in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
When you say neighborhood, does that mean within a block or to 3 blocks around the church, or does the church decide what the neighborhood is? And
The discernment team decides who the neighborhood is, and that's where your demographic study is going to be
Okay.
from. So when I say the neighborhood, that means your demographic study.
yeah, I just wanted to make sure it was broader than.
Because some places I've done it, it really was, we drew, lines around the streets. And it was maybe 2-3 blocks in either direction. I mean, this is in Philadelphia, of course, but but some places it can be like a 1 mile radius. It could be, 4 or 5 miles, depending, like if you're out in, rural Huntington County or Warren County or Sussex County, it may be a little bit further.
Right.
So it depends on what your neighbor, what is
like
the
if you're in
neighbor,
a
what is your
rural
real
area.
neighborhood? Yeah.
Like where we are, would want to be kind of generous with that.
Yeah, you would be a good example. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would be very generous, because of your location. But Rockaway, it would be probably a closer, it wouldn't
Yeah.
be as big as Blairstown, the radius.
I like working with that church. They were fun people.
Other questions? Well, great. I will make this stuff available to you. It's on the web page. I'm gonna make you a little group on my emails to send you out any information if I have updates, that kind of stuff. And then we will work with church development, because Ian and Ryan and Carrie are all church development people. To make sure they know who you are, to get you assigned to churches as needed.
Jean,
Can't-
how are churches coming to this process? So is it through COM? Is it just churches that are, you said, there are churches that are without pastors and they don't have an interim on the horizon.
Yeah.
But also there might be some other congregations that are coming into this process. So are they coming to COM and saying we need to do this, or, how is that happening? I'm just curious.
It mostly starts with COM. It obviously, if the church is without a pastor, and is searching for an installed pastor, they are required to do it, except in some specific cases where the pastor unfortunately left in a short period of time, and we're not making them go back and do a whole thing. We're saying, review some of this, that kind of thing. And we have a couple of those cases. But normally it would be, you do this as with your interim pastor. Because we are so short on interim pastors, we don't want churches just hanging out, not being able to do anything. So we're trying to get them going on this. Also, COM is also, liaisons are aware of maybe churches that are stuck. And then we recommend this process. Or pastors come to me and say, I feel stuck. What do I do? And this, they're introduced to this, kind of thing, and say, you could do this. Some of them do it themselves with the church, as and they just to get the church moving, or they ask for a facilitator because they want to step back from it, kind of thing. So we do it all sorts of ways, but it's primarily it's through COM because the pastor has left. We also, if they're not looking for an installed pastor, but they're looking for a covenant supply, because they're part-time or whatever, what we might do, instead of requiring them to do this before the pastor comes, it is written into the pastor's description that they have to do it after the pastor comes. So we've done that several times too. So it depends on it. And I've also had pastors feel like they're stuck on things and just have them do one part. Like, let's just do the discernment event. to help you with this particular question. So we can guide them to particular things, because some of these pieces, they all work together, but they can also work alone.
Yeah.
For whatever purpose you need it for.
Can I go back? You said this last time we got together, the time it usually takes if you're kind of chugging along, maybe 6 months more if you're not, or is
4 to 6 months if you
Okay.
keep it moving.
Okay.
And I think most of them have done it within 4 to 6 months, until we hit the pandemic. And then
Yeah.
we
That
had
shut
churches
things
that really, got stuck really bad.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, any other questions?
Good stuff.